So these were called kahins, and often kahins were used to regulate disputes. So in this flying around and trying to hide from the authorities and difficulties with the authorities, people from Yathrib came to the pilgrimage in Mecca, and they sought out the Prophet, Medina as we call it, because the Arab tribes, forget the Jewish tribes in Medina for the moment, they're not involved really in this. The Arab tribes in Medina were squabbling, and they needed someone to regulate their disputes. Often this Kahin or other Arab kind of religious figures. I told you one of his wife's relatives was a Hanif. Probably it should be like this. Hanifs, these are traditional Arab, charismatic, holy men, were chosen to regulate these disputes. So that's what happened. After a lot of trouble, in 622, he leaves, and he sends many of his followers before him. One of his favored followers, I guess, Uthman, I think he went to Ethiopia first and then came to Medina. In any case, he gets to Medina. And in very quick order, he's able to resolve the disputes with the Arab tribes in Medina. And very quickly then, he establishes himself really as the leader of the Arab tribes of Medina. This is around between 622 and 624. This does not go down very well among the Meccan authorities, who now see someone who they thought was an outcast and a troublemaker suddenly coming into his own power base in Medina, which is only about, I think, not even 200 miles away, further north. At some point, warfare starts to break out between the Prophet's followers and the Meccan upper class. The first of these battles is fought in 624. It's called the Battle of Badr. It's a very small encounter. And I don't know, probably several hundred people on either side. The Prophet does something unheard of. He sends his people out to raid the Meccan caravan trade during the truce period. This is unheard of because these things are considered you just didn't do this, and besides that, you didn't make war on your own tribesmen, and in fact he was making war on his own tribesmen. But probably there are several reasons for this. If you want to burn your bridges completely and make your followers totally your followers, one good way to do it is to make them do some outlandish thing that they can never be forgiven for, and this is certainly part of that. And the second thing, of course, is that if they had left everything to follow into Medina, they need provision. Someone has to provide for them. He can't just make the Medinese, tax them to support his followers. I mean, even in the modern situation, we know the PLO people went to Tunis or different countries. The Muslims there weren't terribly excited to support them in Lebanon and pay for them and do this sort of thing. You've got to get your own sustenance somehow. Well, one way to get it was to raid the Meccan caravan trade. And so he did at the Battle of Badr, and he's successful. But this didn't sit well with the Meccan elite. So they then sent an army north to deal with the Prophet. Whether it's the next year or the year after, it's somewhere between 625 and 626. And this battle is known as Uhud. Uhud. It's spelled there, U-H-U-D. Uhud.
Badr.
What?
It's a battle before battle.
I already said Badr was the battle before Uhud. So this is the Meccan attempt. It's a bigger forces now. And this battle doesn't go so well for the Muslims in Medina. And the Meccans actually have sent some of their best leaders up there. Now this is one of the leaders who later actually will become a big commander of Muslim forces. But at this point, he's one of the Meccan military commanders in league with the leaders of the Meccan aristocracy. Is called Khalid ibn al-Walid. even in Arab revolutionary thought, for instance, like Palestinian Liberation Organization, they commemorate people like the Khalid ibn al-Walid Strike Force or something like that. You know, he's a famous military commander in Islamic history. And he defeats the Prophet at the Battle of Uhud. And this is bigger forces, maybe 500 or 600 on each side or something. And actually the Prophet is wounded and left for dead. Now, for Islam, you can say, I've got to stop in a minute, but let me just take you to the quarter up and I'll stop. I want to get a good place here. You can say this is a bad thing or a good thing that he wasn't killed. For the Meccans, it's a bad thing in a way because they didn't finish what they started out to do. They thought they had killed the Prophet and he wasn't killed. And as he lived to fight another day. So, but he was wounded and he was left for dead on the battlefield and he didn't die. And so the Meccans bring another campaign, and this is called the Battle of the Trench. This is around 627, the Battle of the Trench. They sent a much bigger army north to deal with the people in Medina and the Prophet because they didn't deal sufficiently with him at the Battle of Uhud. And here disaster strikes the Meccans because they build this trench. The Prophet's forces build a trench. Medina is surrounded on both sides by palm groves, where they did this cultivation of palms. And there was an open area that was open to assault. So supposedly a Persian supporter of the Prophet, a convert from Judaism called Solomon, recommended the Prophet that he build a trench to stop the cavalry, the horsemen, from being able to easily enter Medina. And this battle is named after the trench that was built to stop the cavalry and other animal riding groups from easily entering Medina, and it's successful. So what happens is the whole thing bogs down into a siege. And sieges, warfare is easy to get people to do, but sieges become boring and trying, and people have families. And since the whole thing degenerates into a siege, ultimately dissension breaks out in the Meccan camp, disease, and the Meccan besieging forces fall apart. And the next year, the Prophet takes advantage of that to march himself on Mecca. We'll pick up there next time. And we'll also see how the surah, start reading the other surah, Surah 2. We'll see how Surah 2 relates